Running show in television history. This is Meet the Press with Kristen Welker.
Good Sunday morning. We begin this new chapter of Meet the Press after yet another extraordinary week in American politics. House Republicans announced an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. The president's son, Hunter, was indicted on gun charges, and House conservatives doubled down on their threat to shut down the government. Meanwhile, people close to President Biden are increasingly worried his son's legal troubles could strain the president's focus on what's expected to be a razor-close election. It was against that backdrop that I sat down with the former president at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. His first network interview since leaving office. We have extended the same invitation to President Biden. Mr. Trump has been criminally indicted 4 times and faces 91 felony counts, but continues to hold a commanding lead as the Republican frontrunner. I began by asking Mr. Trump what a second term would look like if he's reelected. When you talk about retribution, are you talking about directing your attorney general to try to go after your political enemies?
When I talk about retribution, I'm talking about fairness. We have to treat people fairly. These people on January 6th, some of them never even went into the building, and they're being given sentences of, many years.
Are you going to pardon those people who've been convicted,
Mr.
President?
Look at them, and I certainly might if I think it's appropriate. No, it's a very, very sad thing, and they're dividing the country so badly, and it's very dangerous.
Well, Mr. President, we're going to delve into that a little bit later on, but I want to stay on this idea of what you mean by retribution. Are you looking to appoint an attorney general who will prosecute the people you tell them to prosecute?
I'm looking to appoint an attorney general who's going to be tough on crime and fair. Very simple.
Speaker McCarthy announced that he was launching an impeachment inquiry this week into President Biden. Do you see this as a part of the retribution that you seek?
No, not at all. I think, look, you look at the terrible things that have been happening with respect to Biden. Look at everything. Jamie Comer, Jim Jordan, who are fantastic people and very legitimate people. I watched Jamie Comer just a little while ago talking about a lot of different facets of what's going on. And he was the one that said, I guess there are 12 things where it looks like it's stone cold guilty. And the gun charge is only one of the 12. He said, this is the only one that doesn't implicate Joe Biden.
But my question for you, did you talk to Speaker McCarthy about this House impeachment inquiry?
No, I don't talk to him.
Tell him that he should open a House impeachment
No, I don't do that. I don't think he'd do that. I mean, he wouldn't do it based on me, no.
Did you talk to your Republican allies on Capitol Hill and say you should support this impeachment inquiry?
No, I don't have to talk. They're more proactive than I am. They think it's terrible.
Do you think Republican hardliners should abandon their threat to shut down the government over their spending priorities now that there is this impeachment?
No, I think if they don't get a fair deal, we have to save our country. We have $35 trillion in debt. We have to save our country.
So you would shut down the government? You'd support that?
I'd shut down the government if they can't make an appropriate deal, absolutely.
You are facing 4 indictments, 91 felony charges.
If you would say it properly, I'm facing 4 Biden indictments. He told the Justice Department to indict him, or Merrick Garland said, let's indict him.
Let me ask you this, Mr. President.
They indicted their political opponent.
I just want to hear from you on this. I want to know what's in your head. When you go to bed at night, do you worry about going to jail?
No, I don't, really. I don't even think about it. I'm built a little differently, I guess, because I have had people come up to me and say, how do you do it, sir? How do you do it? I don't even think about it. These are corrupt people that I'm dealing with. They're destroying our country. I don't even think about it. All I think about is making the country great, making America great. Look, these are political, these are Banana Republic indictments. These are third world indictments. The President of the United States sees how we're doing. We have a movement, the likes of which has never happened in this country before. And you see it with the polls. I mean, I'm up on these people by 60 points and 59 points. I don't mean I'm at 59. I'm leading them by 59. You almost say, like, why are they campaigning? Asa Hutchinson, he's at 0. Christie's at 2. Other ones are at 1. DeSanctimonious is at 9. I just see a poll coming. I mean, I'm leading him by 60 points.
Mr. President.
And you say, why are they doing it? But here's what they did. They saw this happening. and he went to the Attorney General of the United States, and he told him, indict Trump.
There's just no evidence of that, Mr.
Why?
President.
Because you mean he's
but let's stay on track.
Look at all the lies he's told.
Mr. President, I want to talk
Kristen,
about
wait a minute. Wait. Could I say one thing? Look at all the lies he's told over the last couple of weeks. He said he was at the World Trade Center, and he wasn't. He said he flew airplanes, right? He didn't. He said he drove trucks, and he didn't. Everything he says is like a lie. It's terrible.
Mr. President,
even his handicap in golf, he said he's a 6. He's not a 6.
I want to stay focused on you,
okay,
for the purposes of this interview, okay? Because it's important that we hear from you about all of this.
Well, I'd like you to, but you keep interrupting me.
Tell me, Mr. President, tell me what you see when you look at your mugshot.
I see somebody that loves this country in me, that loves this country. I see tremendous unfairness. I think very few people would have been able to handle what I handled.
By the way, do you think your former Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, is still loyal to you? He just pleaded not guilty in the Georgia
Well, I hope
case.
he's loyal to me. I mean,
do you worry about him flipping?
Wrong.
Do you worry
I didn't
about
do
him?
anything wrong.
Okay. I want to ask you about the case related to Mar-a-Lago. A new charge suggests you asked a staffer to delete security camera footage so it wouldn't get into the hands of investigators. Did you do that? It's false.
But let me tell you what
Would you testify to that under oath?
I'm going to. I'll testify.
You testify to that under oath?
It's a fake charge by this deranged lunatic prosecutor who lost in the Supreme Court 9-0, and he tried to destroy lots of lives. He's a lunatic. So it's a fake charge. But more importantly, the tapes weren't deleted. In other words, there was nothing done to them. And they were my tapes. I could have fought them. I didn't even have to give them the tapes, I don't think. I think I would have won in court. When they asked for the tapes, I said, sure, they're my tapes. I could have fought them. I didn't even have to give them. Just so you understand, though, we didn't delete anything. Nothing was deleted.
So that's false. The people who testified...
Well, number one, the statement is false. Much more importantly, when the tapes came, and everybody says this, they weren't deleted. We gave them 100%.
Okay, let's...
And just so you know, I offered them. I said, if you want to look at tapes, you can look at them.
Let's move on to January 6th and the allegations that you tried to subvert the election. And again, I just want to give you a chance to talk about this because voters want to hear about this. The most senior lawyers in your own administration and on your campaign told you that after you'd lost more than 60 legal challenges, that it was over. Why did you ignore them and decide to listen to a new outside group?
Because I didn't respect them.
You'd hired them.
Sure, but that doesn't mean, you know, you hire them, you never met these people, you get a recommendation, they turn out to be rhinos or they turn out to be not so good. In many cases, I didn't respect them, but I did respect others. I respected many others that said the election was rigged.
You called some of your outside lawyers. You said they had crazy theories. Why were you listening to them? Were you listening to them because they were telling you what you wanted to hear?
You know who I listened to myself? I saw what happened. I watched that election, and I thought the election was over at 10 o'clock in the evening.
You were listening to your instincts.
My instincts are a big part of it. That's been the thing that's gotten me to where I am, my instincts. But I also listen to people. There are many lawyers. I could give you many books. There are books that are written on how the election was rigged. There are numerous books that were written on how the election was rigged.
Just to be clear, were you listening to your lawyer's advice or were you listening to your own instincts?
I was listening to different people, and when I added it all up, the election was rigged. There are books
were you
that
calling
are written.
The shots, though?
In fact, Molly Hemingway wrote a great book.
But were you
called
calling
Rigged.
the shots ultimately?
Excuse me. Molly Hemingway, who's highly respected and great, she wrote a book, a best-selling book called Rigged.
Were you calling the shots, though, Mr. President, ultimately?
As to whether or not I believed it was rigged, oh, sure. It was my decision, but I listened to some people. Some people said that. Like guys like Bill Barr, he was a stiff, but he wasn't there at the time. But he didn't do his job because he was afraid. You know what he was afraid of? He was afraid of being impeached. He was petrified to be impeached. And how do you not get impeached? Don't do anything.
Now, as you just heard, former President Trump referred to the federal indictments against him as Biden indictments. The indictments have been charged by a special counsel, and according to the White House, President Biden has not spoken to the Attorney General about them, and the White House found out about them from news reports. As for the impeachment inquiry, so far, congressional investigators have not presented any evidence that President Biden has profited off of Hunter Biden's business dealings. I also talked to former President Trump about his actions on January 6th and why he never sent help when the Capitol was under attack. In our conversation, he directly contradicted the sworn testimony of one of his aides, who testified to the January 6th committee that the former president was so determined to go to the Capitol himself after his rally that he grabbed a Secret Service agent inside the president's limo. Take a listen.
I wanted to go down peacefully and patriotically to the Capitol. Secret Service, who I have great respect for, said, sir, it's better if you don't do that. It could be unsafe. Because they didn't mean because of riots, because, you know, it takes one guy with bad intentions, okay? So I didn't have a dispute with them. You know, you had that one person said, I grabbed the man around the neck. Actually, I wish I was so strong to be able to do that. These are all tough guys, smart guys.
To dispute that account.
Dispute it? Who wouldn't dispute it? She's the craziest account I've ever heard. You mean that I was in the Beast, and she said I was in the Beast, and the Secret Service didn't win. So I took a guy who was like a black belt in karate and grabbed his neck and tried to choke him.
What happened?
How ridiculous. Just so you understand. And I have great respect for Secret Service, by the way. They're fantastic. The Secret Service said, sir, it would be better if you did. And I said, I'd love to do it. They said it would be better. And so we went back to the White House. Just so you understand, I spoke. I made a very nice speech.
Tell me how you watched this all unfold. Were you in the dining room watching TV?
I'm not going to tell you. I'll tell people later at an appropriate time. Just so you understand, however.
What did you do when the Capitol was under attack, though?
Let me just tell you.
In the moment that the Capitol was under attack.
Did you see the statements I made in the Oval Office and just outside of the Oval Office?
Absolutely. I was there that day.
Our police are great. We love our police. We love everybody. Go home.
This was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, more than
I don't know.
3 hours after the attack started.
But there were tweets that were put out before that.
I want to know who you called
By the way,
on that day.
Nancy Pelosi. I don't have. Why would I tell you that? Listen, Nancy Pelosi was in charge of security. She turned down 10,000 soldiers. If she didn't turn down the soldiers, you wouldn't have had January 6th.
Did you call military or law enforcement?
What?
Did you call military or law enforcement at the moment the Capitol was under attack?
I'm not going to tell you anything. Let me put it this way. I behaved so well. I did such a good job. Nancy Pelosi turned down 10,000 soldiers. If she didn't do that, and now
Nancy Pelosi doesn't have the authority that you have as commander-in-chief, though.
Listen to me, Kristen. Listen to me. I understand that the police testified against her, the chief very strongly against her. Capitol Police, great people. They testified against her, and they burned all the evidence. Okay, they burned all the evidence. They destroyed all the evidence about Nancy Pelosi.
What do you say to people who wonder why you as commander-in-chief, you have authorities that Nancy Pelosi doesn't have as commander-in-chief?
No, she has authority over the Capitol.
Why didn't you send help in that moment, though?
Frankly, just so you understand, I assumed that she took care of it. She turned down.
So when you realized that the National Guard wasn't coming?
Well, you don't realize anything until quite a while. National Guard not coming. I asked it to be there 3 days in advance, and she turned it down.
She says that request was never officially made.
Oh,
just so you know.
Let me just tell you.
Let me ask you about pardons, Mr. President.
The mayor of D.C. gave us a letter saying that she turns it down. Okay, we have it. Nancy Pelosi also was asked, and she turned it down. The police commissioner
I'm talking about
Capitol
the day
Police,
of,
wait a minute.
Yep.
Capitol Police said that he wanted it, and Nancy Pelosi wouldn't accept it. She's responsible for January 6th.
Mr. President.
Nancy Pelosi's responsible.
Mr. President, you're the president, though. You have
her.
authorities that no one else has as the commander-in-chief. Do you think you showed leadership on that day?
Yes, absolutely, I did.
Okay. Mr. President, if you were reelected, would you pardon yourself?
I could have pardoned myself. Do you know what? I was given an option to pardon myself. I could have pardoned myself when I left. People said, would you like to pardon yourself? I had a couple of attorneys that said, you can do it if you want. I had some people that said it would look bad if you do it, because I think it would look terrible. I said, here's the story. These people are thugs, horrible people, fascists, Marxists, sick people. They've been after me from the day I came down the escalator with Melania. And I did a great job as president. People are acknowledged. Great economy, great jobs, great this, great that. Rebuilt the military, Space Force, everything. I could go on forever. Let me just tell you. I said the last thing I'd ever do is give myself a pardon. I could have given myself a pardon. Don't ask me about what I would do. I could have, the last day, I could have had a pardon done that would have saved me all of these lawyers and all of these fake charges, these Biden indictments. They're all Biden indictments, political. They indicted, they want to arrest their political opponents. Only third world countries do that, banana republics. So, ready? I never said this to anybody. I was given the option. I could have done a pardon of myself. You know what I said? I have no interest in even thinking about it. I never even wanted to think about it. And I could have done it. And all of these questions you're asking me about the fake charges, you wouldn't be asking me because it's a very powerful thing for a president. I was told by some people that these are sick lunatics that I'm dealing with. Give yourself a pardon. Your life will be a lot easier. I said, I would never give myself a pardon.
Even if you were reelected in this moment?
Well, I think it's very unlikely. What did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong.
Now, a little bit of context here on Mr. Trump's allegations he ordered troops in the days leading up to the January 6th attack. The Defense Department says the former president never gave a formal order to have 10,000 troops ready to be deployed to the Capitol. Of course, it's unreasonable to blame former Speaker Pelosi or lawmakers on Capitol Hill for what happened that day. Pelosi's office says the claim she turned down troops was, quote, completely made up. When we come back, former President Trump explains how he would handle calls from within the GOP for a federal ban on abortion. Nine Republican candidates were back in Iowa speaking to the Faith and Freedom Coalition, a reminder of how potent the abortion issue is in that early state. Mr. Trump didn't attend the event, but I asked the former president how he would handle abortion in a second term. I do want to talk about the issue of abortion, which is important to a lot of voters all across the country. Just this week, women in Idaho and Tennessee, I don't know if you saw this, filed suit against their state saying their lives were put at risk after they were denied abortion services because their state's restrictive laws put in place after Roe was overturned. So my question for you, Mr. President, is how is it acceptable in America that women's lives are at risk, doctors are being forced to turn away patients in need, or risk breaking the law?
Ready? A little bit of a long answer. I hope you have time.
I hope you have time. Okay. I'm here for as long as you have.
Roe v. Wade. For 52 years, people, including Democrats, wanted it to go back to states so that states could make the right. Roe v. Wade, I did something that nobody thought was possible, and Roe v. Wade was terminated, was put back to the states. Now, people, pro-lifers, have the right to negotiate for the first time. They had no rights at all. Because the radical people on this are really the people, the Democrats, that say after 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, 8 months, 9 months, and even after birth, you're allowed to terminate the baby.
Democrats aren't saying that. I just have to. Democrats are not saying that. Does it bother you, though, that women say their lives are being put at risk? Do you feel you bear any responsibility? Because, as you say, you are responsible for having Roe v. Wade overturned.
This is an issue that's been going on for a long time, and it's a very polarizing issue. Because of what's been done, and because of the fact we brought it back to the states, we're going to have people come together on this issue. They're going to determine the time, because nobody wants to see 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 months. Nobody wants to see abortions when you have a baby in the womb. I said with Hillary Clinton when we had the debate, I made a statement, rip the baby out of the womb in the 9th month. You're allowed to do that, and you shouldn't be allowed to do that.
Again, no one is arguing for that. That's not a part of anyone's platform, Mr. President.
The Democrats are able to kill the baby after birth.
Let me talk to you.
Nobody wants that.
Democrats don't want that
so
either.
We're going to come together.
I want to know what you want. I want to know what you're going to do if you're reelected.
We are going to come together.
Would you sign federal legislation that would ban abortion at 15 weeks?
No. Let me just tell you what I do. I'm going to come together with all groups, and we're going to have something that's acceptable. Right now, to my way of thinking, the Democrats are the radicals, because after 4 and 5 and 6 months, but you have to say this, after birth. You have New York State and other places that pass legislation where you're allowed to kill the baby after birth.
Mr. President, I want to give voters who are going to be weighing in on this election a very clear sense of where you stand on this.
I think they're all going to like me. I think both sides are going to like me.
What's going to have to happen
is you're going to have to... Kristen, you're asking me a question. What's going to happen is you're going to come up with a number of weeks or months. You're going to come up with a number that's going to make people happy. Because 92% of the Democrats don't want to see abortion after a certain period of time.
If a federal ban landed on your desk, if you were reelected, would you sign it at 15 weeks?
Are you talking about a complete ban?
A ban at 15 weeks.
Well, people are starting to think of 15 weeks. That seems to be a number that people are talking about right now.
Would you sign that?
I would sit down with both sides and I'd negotiate something, and we'll end up with peace on that issue for the first time in 52 years. I'm not going to say I would or I wouldn't. I mean, DeSantis is willing to sign a 5-week and 6-week ban.
Would you support that? You think that goes too far?
I think what he did is a terrible thing and a terrible mistake. But we'll come up with a number. But at the same time, Democrats won't be able to go out in 6 months, 7 months, 8 months and allow an abortion.
Mr. President, when you talk about negotiating, I think a lot of people think to themselves, this is an issue that they care about deeply in their hearts.
Oh, I care about it too.
They know where they stand, and they want to know where you stand. As you know, some anti-abortion groups are really looking for some clarity from you. So let me just ask you to put a fine point on this. Should the federal government impose any abortion restrictions, or should it be completely left up to the states?
No, I don't think you should be allowed to have abortions well into a pregnancy.
But what about the question I just asked you?
No, we're going to agree to a number of weeks or months or however you want to define it. And both sides are going to come together, and both sides, and this is a big statement, both sides will come together, and for the first time in 52 years, you'll have an issue that we can put behind us.
At the federal level?
It could be state or it could be federal. I don't frankly care.
So you're not committed to a ban at the federal level?
I will say this. Everybody, including the great legal scholars, love the idea of Roe v. Wade terminated so it be brought back to the states.
It sounds like that's what you think, too, that it should remain a state issue.
I would say this. From a pure standpoint, from a legal standpoint, I think it's probably better, but I can live with it either way. It's much more important. The number of weeks is much more important. But something will happen with the number of weeks, the amount of time, after which you can't do it. And you know what? The most powerful people that are anti-abortion are okay with that now. And you know what? They weren't okay with that even a year ago.
Your former Vice President, Mike Pence, believes that a fetus should have constitutional rights. Do you believe that, Mr.
Well,
President?
Mike Pence said something about 15 weeks, too, which was a big change for Mike Pence because Mike Pence had no exceptions. I have exceptions, by the way. I think people should have exceptions. I think if it's rape or incest or the life of the mother, I think you have to have exceptions.
Does a fetus have constitutional rights, Mr.
And a lot of
President?
people, when they don't have exceptions. Now, I will tell you that I think most people, most Republicans are willing. You go life of the mother, rape, incest. I think most of them are there.
But should a
That's a
fetus
big
have
statement.
constitutional rights, Mr. President?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what he's saying because before he wanted, you couldn't have abortion.
But what
at
are
all.
you saying?
Now all of
What
a
do
sudden,
you think?
excuse me. Now all of a sudden he's saying 15 weeks. I said, wow, where did that come from? That's a radical change. Look, something is going to happen that's going to be good for everybody. And that's what I'm almost like a mediator in this case. They wanted Roe v. Wade terminated because it was inappropriate. We got it done. Something's going to happen. It's going to be a number of weeks. Something's going to happen where both sides are going to be able to come together. And then we'll be able to go into other things like the economy, our military.
Are you saying a federal ban with exceptions? Is that what you're saying?
What I say is very simple, because you can't put words in my mouth like that, because you've been hearing me talk about this issue, and I think talk about it very productively. It could be a state ban. It could be a federal ban. But Democrats want that, too. Democrats don't want to see abortion in the 7th month. Okay, I speak to a lot of Democrats. They want a number. There is a number, and there's a number that's going to be agreed to. And Republicans should go out and say the following, because I think the Republicans speak very inarticulately about this subject. I watched some of them without the exceptions, et cetera, et cetera. I said, other than certain parts of the country, you're not going to win on this issue, but you will win on this issue when you come up with the right number of weeks, because Democrats don't want to be radical on the issue. Most of them, some do. They don't want to be radical on the issue. They don't want to kill a baby in the 7th month or the 9th month or after birth. And they're allowed to do that, and you can't do that.
One important fact check we do want to highlight: abortions later in pregnancy are exceedingly rare. When we come back, we turn to foreign policy, the war in Ukraine, and whether Mr. Trump would consider sending the U.S. military into Taiwan if China were to invade. Former President Trump are turning away from the party's traditional national security roots and questioning the U.S.'s commitment to the war. I asked Mr. Trump about what he believes are the stakes in Ukraine for the United States. Do you think that our security, the United States security, is linked to Ukraine's security?
I think that Europe has to do more. We're in for $200 billion. They're in for $25 billion. And it affects them more than it affects us. It certainly affects them much more than it affects us.
So you do think that it's linked in some way?
I think Europe has taken advantage of a stupid president.
You've probably...
Look, Biden should say to them, you have to equalize. You have to catch up. You know, Europe is about the same size as our economy if you add them all up, add the countries up. It's about the same size. And Biden should say to them, like I did with NATO. You know, NATO, they all owed money. I said, get your money in. And we had over $430 billion put in almost immediately. And the head of NATO, Stoltenberg, Secretary General, nice guy, he said to me, most amazing thing I've ever done. And he said it publicly, too.
Let me ask you about your strategy, though, because you have said you want to end this war in 24 hours. You saw the meeting between Kim Jong-un and President Putin.
Right.
Do you think that complicates your strategy if you were reelected to try to end this war in 24 hours?
It would have been easier if the war didn't start, and you'd have hundreds of thousands of people living, most importantly. But it would have been a lot easier if it didn't. But I can get it done, and I can get it done quickly.
Some people hear you say you're going to end the war in 24 hours, and they worry that means President Putin is going to get to keep the territory he's unlawfully
I'd make a fair deal for everybody, but nope.
Doesn't mean that? Wouldn't be a win for Putin?
You know, that's something that could have been negotiated because there were certain parts, Crimea and other parts of the country that a lot of people expected could happen. You could have made a deal. So they could have made a deal where there's less territory right now than Russia's already taken, to be honest. And you could have made a deal where nobody was killed. They had a deal. They would have had a Ukraine country. Now nobody even knows if Ukraine is going to be totally taken over. I will say this. Something's going on, and it's not good for Ukraine.
I want to ask you about something President Putin said about you this week. I don't know if you've seen it. This was very recent. President Putin said, quote, "We surely hear that Mr. Trump says he will resolve all burning issues within several days, including the Ukrainian crisis. We cannot help but feel happy about it." What do you make of that? Do you welcome this support?
I like that he said that because that means what I'm saying is right. I would get him into a room, I'd get Zelensky into a room, then I'd bring them together and I'd have a deal worked out. I would get a deal worked out. It would have been a lot easier before it started. Essentially, for 4 years, I kept them from doing anything because, you know what, I will tell you this, I've never said this, Ukraine was the apple of his eye. I said, don't ever do it, don't ever do it. He would have never done it. But again, oil prices, he wouldn't have done it because of me, but oil prices. The prices were so high that he had so much money, so he had all this money to prosecute the war. The one who drove up the prices was Biden.
Given that President Putin has bombed maternity wards, 20,000 kids kidnapped from Ukraine by Russia, mass graves, do you welcome his support, his all but endorsement?
Look, I had a very good relationship with him. And yet nobody was tougher on Russia than me. I stopped Nord Stream 2. You never heard of Nord Stream 2. That was the pipeline until I got involved. I said Nord Stream 2, people that were sophisticated, military people and political people, never heard of Nord Stream 2. I had it ended. The pipeline was dead. Biden came in and he approved it. There was nobody tougher than me with Russia, and yet I got along with Putin. Let me tell you, I got along with him really well. And that's a good thing, not a bad thing. He's got 1,700 nuclear missiles, and so do we. But look, that's a good thing. Getting along is okay, but I got along through strength. And the war would have never happened. The war would have never happened. Now what's happened, it's so bad. The oil price is so high. It's hard to get it stopped. The oil price is so high. When he goes above $50 and $60 a barrel, he makes a lot of money on the war. Now, it's a humanitarian thing. It's a lot of different reasons. But I will get that war stopped very, very quickly.
I want to talk about another region that you talked about. Let's talk about another region you talked about, China. If you were to cut a deal between President Putin and President Zelensky, do you run the risk of emboldening China to invade Taiwan?
No, not at all. Because China, he's another one I got along to until we had the China virus come in. Once COVID came in, okay, once it was like, I made a great trade deal with China, one of the greatest deals ever made for the farmers and for the manufacturers. $50 billion a year is a great deal. I don't even talk about it because once COVID came in, it was like, I didn't want to talk about anything. I was a much different person. What happened to this world, not our country, the whole world, what happened with COVID, and it just shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have happened. What happened, what China did to the world was so bad. But I had a great relationship with...
Would you send troops
I had a great
to Taiwan?
relationship with President Xi. Really great relationship. And he was going to stop fentanyl from coming in. He was going to do a lot of... He was going to criminalize it if you made it. In China, they have a death penalty for drug dealers. He was going to make that with fentanyl dealers, too. But then the election didn't work out, and he never had to do that.
I know you've been asked this, but very quickly, if China were to invade Taiwan, have you made a determination, again, since voters are about to go to the polls, would you send the U.S. military into Taiwan if President Xi were to invade? President Biden says he would.
I won't say, because if I said, I'm giving away, only stupid people are going to give that answer. I heard the other day, DeSanctimonious said something about he was going to do this or he was going to do that. I say, well, why is he saying the strategy? You can't say that. So when you ask me that question, I would never say that because you give away all your options.
But you don't take it off the table?
I don't take anything off the table, no.
And you can see my full unedited interview with the former president following the broadcast at meetthepress.com. We also talked about the economy, the UAW standoff, the Hunter Biden indictment, and a potential running mate, among many other issues. We do have a fact check available and much more reporting at NBCnews.com. And when we come back, the panel is here with their reaction.